In 1945, after the Japanese had dropped the bomb on Pearl Harbor during the Second World War, they proceeded to make their way through Asia, subjugating one country after another before eventually making their way to the Philippines. Every Filipino knows how much cruelty we had to take from the imperialists during their rule. Millions of our countrymen taken prisoner, captured, and mistreated by soldiers who were uninvited guests in our motherland. But what if I told you that during this time, not all Japanese nationals in our country were on the same page, and there was actually someone who, rather than hurt us, chose instead to help us and go against their fellow countrymen. The story of the lady known as Nana Masay isn't very well known amongst our people. A legend once remembered in the town of San Narciso, Zambales, but nowadays has long been forgotten by many, with only a select few who remember her story.
Nana Masay.
I actually call her Lola Masay.
Nana Masay.
Nana Masay.
What is Nana Masay's story? And what is her story's significance to the town of San Narciso and those whose lives she has touched? Join me as I tell the extraordinary tale of Masue Masuda-Almazan. I've been visiting San Narciso even before I started learning how to walk. And based on my experiences so far, all I could say is it's usually very quiet. It has many common elements of the Filipino countryside, such as people selling goods from stores right outside their homes, a marketplace where people buy meat, produce, and other possible needs, and a local church where people gather for worship, as per local tradition. It also has various stretches of greenery, courtesy of the open fields that are also common in many provinces. The town has a tightly knit community where everyone knows each other. It's even common among the townsfolk to be neighbors with their relatives. They're simple folk, living contentedly while tackling their daily responsibilities and participating in social events. However, during most days, it appears to be rather plain and uneventful. But, if you look closely, tiny remnants of the town's history can be seen in a majority of the old Spanish houses and areas in the barangays where houses need to be, hinting that there's more to this town than it actually seems. One of the town's hidden tales is the story of Masue Masuda-Almazan, better known as Nana Masay, a Japanese woman who used her position as translator for the imperial forces to save many Filipinos from pain and death. In the present, almost nobody recognizes her name, but those who do have nothing but respect and admiration for her.
Nana Masay is very helpful and very kind woman. And I know she's like an intelligent person.
Nana Masay is a very accommodating woman. Yeah, being a Japanese woman, you see, and during World War II, yeah, I have seen her, and I have known that Nana Masay was a great help to the Narcisinians.
Masue Masuda was born in 1945, being the youngest daughter of Japanese merchants Umejiro Masuda and Moe Fukumori. In 1823, the couple emigrated from Japan to Australia in search of greener pastures. The Masuda family once owned a silk shop at the coastal city of Broome, 2,250 kilometers northeast of Perth, Australia. At the time, the city's economy was flourishing due to frequent tourism and had been abundant in Japanese expats long before they arrived. Business was thriving, and for a while, the Japanese family enjoyed a comfortable life before a financial crisis hit the family and Masue was forced to go back to her home country.
So, we're making our way to Nana Masay's grave. This is exactly.
It was very quiet.
So it was said that Nana Masay was a very bright woman, very smart, and displayed some of the early traits that she would become known for once she lands in San Narciso. During their time in Australia, her father suggested that it would actually be a good idea for her to be a teacher, since being a teacher was regarded as a very honorable job in Japanese society.
However, everything changed just before the day that World War I broke out. Tourists were few and far between, and the sales plummeted. In 1945, financial constraints forced the couple to send Masue and her older sister back to Nagasaki, Japan, where they would finish their studies and live under the care of their grandmother and aunts, who sent Masue to the Tokyo University of Education to train as a teacher. She learned how to be independent and became so determined to finish her studies. She wanted to be a teacher, and that's exactly what she became. In 1920, the much-awaited reunion with her parents finally happened. Umejiro and Moe returned to Nagasaki after leaving Australia and operating a short-lived retail business in Manila, Philippines. Unfortunately, Umejiro died a few years later. Around this time, a flock of Japanese immigrants settled down in Davao City, working within the colony of Abaca plant traders. Masue's mother and sister, who married a photographer, decided to join the thriving Japanese community. Soon, Masue followed, and after finding out about a position for a teaching job at a school while mingling with the other immigrants, Masai became a beloved teacher of children in the first Japanese school in Mintal, Davao, teaching children who wished to learn the Japanese language.
So it turns out that Nana Masai's grave is in a zone in the cemetery that is considered off limits. So unfortunately, we can't come in and take a closer look. It's right over there.
It was also during this time where she would meet her future husband, a Filipino named Vicente-Almazan.
So they met in Davao because they were both teachers. So Nana Masai is teaching Japanese children during the pre-war time. And also my grandfather was a teacher, a PE teacher, physical education teacher. So they met in school, that's what I know. And the love story begins there.
Vicente was known for his good looks and friendly manner. He was enamored by Masue's charm, simplicity, and natural kindness. They eventually married in secret, with only the judge who performed the ceremony and Vicente's family as witnesses to the event, and both parties had been sworn to secrecy. However, once Masue's family found out about their marriage, their disapproval was blatantly obvious. During their interactions with Vicente, they were civil but very cold, as they deemed it unacceptable that Masue would marry someone who isn't Japanese. Seeing the pain in Masue's eyes from the uncertainty of forgiveness from her relatives, Vicente decided that the best thing he should do is to move back to his home in San Narciso, where they would be accepted for who they are and they could live without the burden of prejudice, and they would be free to love each other regardless of the circumstances. Once they got to San Narciso, they quickly settled into their new life. Vicente worked as a farmer in a 1.5-hectare land he shared with his cousin, while Masue, endearingly called Masai by the townsfolk, committed to being a full-time housewife to their 8 children. Masai was a very friendly and very polite woman, being well-liked and having many friends among the neighborhood.
From all the stories that I've heard from the olds, that she was so kind-hearted, she was so selfless, that she was willing to do what she can, even if she had to sacrifice herself.
The humblest, kindest woman you would think of. So as much as you want to think of it as a perception of a fairy tale, or she really was a humble woman.
Life was going well for the Almazan family until the Japanese invaded San Narciso, setting up their headquarters in the old Vicente Posadas building, turning it into the local garrison, where people suspected of being against Japanese authority were detained and interrogated, and occasionally tortured and executed. On that day, the entire town started becoming subjected to Japanese cruelty.
One mistake by saying arigato, which means thank you, yeah. By saying konnichiwa, which means good morning. Am I right? Yeah. Konnichiwa. And the way you bow your heads if you make a mistake.
Nana Masai, once discovered by the Kempeitai, was ordered to be an interpreter for the imperial soldiers, becoming a central figure in the garrison's daily activities. Nana Masai accepted the task without hesitation, not only because she felt like she had no choice, but also because she felt that she could be of service to her townmates who trusted her so much. She couldn't let them down.
There was not a lot of Japanese people in Zambales, especially San Narciso. And the Japanese, knowing that she was a migrant and the Japanese is pure blood at the time, she was obviously, I guess, the best person or the best point person for the Japanese.
That palengke of ours, that was the killing fields of the Japanese, as told by my brother, because they would watch in the evening. They would make the prisoner dig a grave, and they would make the prisoner sit at the edge of the grave. So you would not hear anything. They would either get the shovel or the rifle, hit him on the head. So that person would fall back, and kahit na buhay ka pa, tatabunan ka na ng lupa.
So here I am outside the local marketplace. According to Dr. Fontilias, it's either the area surrounding the marketplace, somewhere there, used to be where the old garrison stood. Unfortunately, it's gone now and I can't find it. But in this area, back in the time of the war, this was where Nana Masai would usually be called to serve as an interpreter for the Japanese. The reason for this was during that time, there were two nationals that they chose to serve as interpreters to the townspeople. One was an officer named Minora, and the other one was Nana Masai herself. To them, Nana Masai seemed like the logical choice because due to her educational background, not only did she know how to speak Japanese, but she also knew how to speak English. And during her time here, she also learned how to speak Ilocano and a little bit of Tagalog. So her job was very important.
It was not long after that great tragedy struck, leading to a death in the family. Vicente Almazan was walking down the steps of his house one night, but he did not know that those steps would lead to his last breath. During this time, tension was strong between the Japanese and Filipinos, and not only was Vicente's family looked at with great suspicion due to having a Japanese wife, but he also formed a partnership with Minora in selling goods out of their 6x6 truck. In September of 1942, Vicente Almazan was shot dead by a member of the guerrilla forces.
So apparently, this house right behind me, this is the house where apparently Vicente Almazan got shot as he was going down the stairs one morning. Apparently this was also a house they just rented, so they don't, apparently they stopped living here once the war was over.
It was also said that during this time, due to Vicente's struggle with trying to feed his family, he became very temperamental, and out of anger would often end up intimidating other people with his words.
Sinasabi daw ni Nana Masai sa kanya, huwag kang magsalita ng ganyan. Kasi daw, parang naging matapang din si Tata Vicente kasi, sige, lukuhin niyo ako, pahapon kayo, ganon. Kaya sabi daw ni Nana Masai sa kanya, Vicente, no, that is not good, do not say that. Kaya lang, ganon siya magsalita. Kaya, siyempre marami na nagalit sa kanya. Sa kaya lang suspicion ng a 14-year-old from San Rafael.
Upon her husband's death, Nana Masai had every reason to hate. She could have turned against the Filipinos, she could have chosen to support her homeland in their cruelty. But on that day, she remained adamant in showing love and mercy to the place she and her family called home, earning her the respect of the townspeople. She remained strong for both herself and her family.
She never said anything bad about anybody. She never cursed anybody. She just helped people when she could help. She did everything for that. What else can you say?
According to a book about Nana Masai's life by Dr. John Fontilias, the Japanese continued their operations in San Narciso, with Nana Masai serving as a bridge of communication. It was here that Nana Masai utilized her position in order to intercede and plead for the prisoners' freedom. The first time someone asked for Nana Masay's help was 3 days after Vicente's burial, and soon hundreds more followed, and Nana Masay, regardless of what time of the night it was, would hurry to the garrison without hesitation and ask for the prisoners to be set free. Nana Masay became the go-to person for the family members of Filipinos imprisoned and tortured by the Japanese.
She helped or save people, and they even called her even in during midnight while she's asleep to run to the garrison part of the San Narciso, or part of the, what do you call that area? So that place, so to help them from Japanese armies.
One of these prisoners was Dr. Fontillas' mother, Elizabeth Stocks Fontillas, an American woman whom, like Nana Masay, also married a Filipino and was also one of Nana Masay's closest friends. I had the opportunity to seek an audience with Dr. Fontillas and his 2 children, Paul and Karen, who were more than willing to share her story with me. Currently, Dr. Fontillas is also the only person in San Narciso who has first-hand knowledge about Nana Masay's story, as his family and that of Nana Masay's were also very close. He was even friends with Nana Masay's children in his youth.
Nana Masay was the best friend of my mother. The daughter was my classmate. I used to go to their house, a small nipa hut house, many times, and Nana Masay, after the war, would come and visit my mother as often as she could. So sometimes I overheard their conversations kasi silang dalawa lang. Nana Masay would go to visit my mother and pour out all her feelings, heartaches. Walang iba eh. She had no other friend, no other Filipino friend. And besides, the only person, the way I look at it now, the only person who could understand her and fight for her was my mother.
Despite World War II, Japan versus US, what old folks would talk about in this town is seeing the 2 women right beside each other, a Japanese and an American, walking together.
Like my dad and the oldies would say before, imagine the wartime. It's Americans versus Japanese. And yet you would see an American woman and a Japanese woman walking hand in hand together, right? So when it came to the time, and according to my father, and even my uncle, my dad's older brother in Hawaii when he was still living, he would say that Nana Masay or Lola Masay, when it was time for the Japanese to look for the Americans and their families, Nana Masay would hide, my grandmother and of course my dad, who was still young then, and vice versa, when it was Americans looking for Japanese.
Mrs. Fontillas was the only American woman to lead Filipino guerrilla troops against the Japanese during the war, thus making her and her family a frequent target. She was eventually captured and then taken to the garrison in Iba, where she endured 3 days of torture. Once Nana Masay found out about her friend's capture, she immediately followed Elizabeth, who was about to be sent to Fort Santiago for execution. Nana Masay pleaded for Elizabeth's life and offered her own instead.
When my grandmother was captured by the Japanese, she was tortured by the Japanese, and tortured in the sense na not what we know of there, it was sexual in nature, but she was tortured. The butt of the gun, they took that and then they hammered, or they kept hitting the feet of my grandmother, to the fact that that's why she had difficulty walking already. So with Nana Masay, it was Nana Masay who went and begged for them to spare her life, just so she would not be put in the what do you call that, the machine gun or whatever. Yeah, but that's what my grandmother suffered from.
Nana Masay signed an affidavit as proof of her role as guarantor for the life of her dear friend, who was later released, becoming one of the many lives she would save from punishment. The Fontillas family keeps the aforementioned document in a picture frame in their home to this day. They were the greatest of friends, and with their bond being so strong that it continued between their children and even their descendants in the following decades after their deaths.
It's very clear there. I offered myself to guarantee that she is innocent. Of course, my mother was not. My mother was inducted by Captain Maguire. Oh, legal yun. Kaya lang, being a friend, she offered her life. Also for the rest. Papatayin na sila eh. Nakaniling na sila sa kwan. Nagdadasal na sila in front of the machine gun. Papatayin na sila in front. Nanonood na yung mga tao para patayin sila.
As someone well trusted and respected by the Kempeitai, Nana Masai found every possible reason to prove the innocence of many, with Dr. Fontiles's book containing nearly 100 accounts from people regarding Nana Masai's exploits. She eventually became a folk heroine amongst the people, known for her compassion that went beyond family and homeland to encompass humanity. A woman whose heart was open to all, and whose love was truly selfless.
Marami hundreds, not just one. Up to Santa Cruz pa, yung isang pinuntahan daw eh, nakatali sa puso, yung prisoner. Nagpunta na naman to intercede for all the way to Candelaria. Anong sakay? Karitela? Kasi yan lang noon. Up to iba, karitela lang yan. Nagkakaritela, binabayaran yung mga taong para makapunta. Karitela lang ginagamit. Pero nagtitiis siya, nagtatsaga siya.
In January 29, 1945, the 11th Corps of the U.S. Liberation Forces came to the shores of La Paz, San Narciso, with the intent of waging war on the imperial forces and helping the Filipinos free their land. However, they were instead met with open arms by the locals, who happily helped them unload their ships. The Japanese had long been driven away before they arrived, having retreated to Olongapo and Subic. The Philippines is now at a time of peace.
So, at that time, the war is finally done. Everyone was free, and we were all at a time of peace. However, life would never be the same after the Japanese had occupied San Narciso. And during the final years after the war, life was never same for Nana Masai or her family.
The last years of Nana Masai's life after the war were not great. She chose to stay behind with her family rather than join her countrymen in retreating to Subic and Olongapo. She was left to fend for herself and her family as she received no help from relatives. Despite this, she opted instead to keep her peace and find other ways to provide.
Since she was not really quite accepted, family had to raise her children on her own. And she lived a life that's very hard and very poor.
She spent the rest of her days living in a small nipa hut with some money she was able to obtain from her dear friend Elizabeth, whom she frequently visited. She eventually converted to Catholicism, receiving the sacrament of baptism at the San Sebastian Parish Church in San Narciso, and was rechristened Elizabeth Masue, taking the first name in honor of her dearest friend. Nana Masai later died of tuberculosis, peacefully in her bed with her daughter Presentacion by her side at 3 p.m. on January 4, 1954. And once the news of her death had spread, the entire town mourned, and with great sorrow, everyone gathered at her home to pay their respects.
When she died, Mayor Sebastian stopped all the trucks and everything. Sabi niya, tumigil kayo. Sabi niya, itong namatay, heroine namin ito, tagapagligtas ng marami. And halos buong bayan nakipaglibing. I was there noon kasi ang mother ko hindi na makapunta. My mother went at night. Pero hirap na kasi naglalakad. Parang 2 hours yung ilang kilometer na nilakad. And something strange at that time, my mother cut 2 of the orchid flower, yung native lang, na inilagay nga, nabasag yung salamin, bumagsak sa chest na.
The story of Nana Masai is hardly ever remembered by anyone, even in San Narciso, despite her great significance to the town's history. She was a very saintly figure who willingly helped anyone in need and never asked for anything in return, with her memory living on in her descendants, the Fontillas family, and other individuals aware of her story, all of whom make an effort to keep it alive.
When I shared some of the books to some of my teachers, they really appreciate how Nana Masai been there in the Philippines. They were, oh really? There is like Oh, okay. So there is a Japanese woman who really come to the Philippines and got married. Yeah. So yes.
The purpose of this documentary is not only to share the story of Nana Masai with the rest of the world, but hopefully to also help inspire many to take the same steps and beliefs that she had and use them to make the world a better place, not only for themselves but also for others. The lessons that Nana Masai's story has about love, compassion, and selflessness are ones that we are never too late to learn from her and apply to our own time, where such traits are inevitably needed more than ever.
If you want to help, don't discriminate whatever race, whatever the kind of person she is or he is. He even be bad or good. If your intention is to help, help.
Friendship is friendship. There is no such thing as 70% friendship, 60%. If you're friends, you're friends. And it should not be based on the color of your skin. No, it should be based on you're a human being, I'm a human being. You like this, I like this. We help each other.
Nana Masai is a perfect example that, hey, she was of a different religion, she was a different nationality, but she did not stop in trying to do good elsewhere, beyond her country. She did not stop to help others in need, even if they were not of her own kind.
Nana Masai basically helped people out for the sake of helping those in need. It had nothing to do with the race, the culture, or nationality, or whatever what you want to use. It was just, she was there for her fellow man.
These virtues are the same virtues. Hope, love, charity. And she followed it without question.
The good Lord had used Nana Masai as an instrument. You see, sometimes the Lord is using an instrument, with unknowingly. Nana Masai, what is Nana Masai doing? Is that that is the good Lord's wish also.
After everything I learned, the story of Nana Masai made me see the town of San Narciso in a whole new light. Despite being quiet and uneventful during most days, it still has a few extraordinary mysteries that are yet to be uncovered, with many tales such as this one enabling me to conclude that there's more to this town than meets the eye. With this documentary, I could hopefully do my part in ensuring that the name of Masue Masuda-Almazan will be remembered as one associated with great virtue and would remind people that regardless of who you are, where you're from, or how much money you make, it wouldn't cost you anything to help out your fellow man and to always make a great deal of effort in being better than who you were yesterday. In time, Nana Masai's story will be remembered by millions, who in turn would be encouraged to help out their own communities and assist in creating a better tomorrow.